Well, Brian Wang, you know what? It has been a heck of a week. I'm
Hmm.
I'm pretty darn excited about what we've seen going on in Washington, D.C. But everybody already knows that about me. They'd probably like to hear what you have to say after 2 days of uh, of the Trump and the Musk administration.
Right, right. So, most exciting thing for me is the $500 billion Stargate data center that Trump announced with not with Elon, but with SoftBank's Mayo I forget how to
Yeah.
pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
Mayo San or something like that. So who runs SoftBank, who's going to be chairman of this thing. OpenAI, Sam Altman, Larry Ellison of Oracle, and MGX, which is a sovereign wealth fund of the UAE,
I see. Okay.
putting the money behind this thing.
Ah,
Um, so yes, it's not all $500 billion at once. It's $100 billion in the first year, and even that they're not fully raised, right? So the Elon says, yes, they don't have all that money, but they're partnered in with Kuwait, their sovereign funds. They can get the money, right?
right.
It's just that they don't like say, here we have our entire treasury here, we dump it in right now. It's like not going to happen that way. So, and so the commitments would, but it's not like their check is going to bounce.
Yeah, and Kuwait might want to see the first, building being built and see how it's going, make sure everything's good. Uh,
Actually, they already have certain buildings down there. This is going into Abilene, Texas.
yeah.
So Abilene is a small college town, 150,000 people. Um, and they already have data centers starting to go in there.
Okay.
But this is going to be a many building complexes.
Right.
And they're going to be like phase one is going into Abilene, Texas. And then they're going to go to other states as well.
Oh, okay.
Um, so it's kind of going in all over. Um, the specifics aren't still not known,
Sure,
right? Because they
sure.
just announced it, right?
Yeah.
But they were looking to, in part of the initial announcement, they talked about making about 20 buildings. But again, there's a bit of confusion as to, you know, who's building, are certain groups in, certain groups out. But it's, if you're going to build that big a thing, they could double the population of Abilene, with all
Right.
the things they're dumping all there. But I think it will be more locations, but exactly how much in which spot is unclear.
Yeah, and they talked about 100,000 employees, but you wouldn't normally think about that number of employees when you're talking about data centers. So are they talking about 100,000 employees that will be working on the projects that are associated with the kind of stuff like the medical data they're going to receive out of the system?
I'm thinking it's like they have some massive project plan that includes we're going to build um, 100 campuses
Oh, I
all
see. I
over.
see.
So then we'll build that, and then the road projects, the fiber
I see.
projects,
I see. I see.
the energy projects. It's like massive infrastructure. It's like if I'm going to build a $500 billion of infrastructure,
Yeah. Yeah.
then all kinds of jobs. But in terms of like ongoing jobs,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think they're talking about that.
Okay.
I don't think that would be far
Yeah.
less
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah, I would think so. All right. And so what do you see as being the uh again, we've had so much going on this week, and yet you put this number one on the list. What do you see as being the big aha moment with regard to it?
I think we knew that Sam Altman was trying to raise $7 trillion. He wants to get a lot of chips. He wants to get a lot of data centers. So there's not the aha moment is that all the people who said that the the build out of data centers and chips and all that kind of stuff, it plateau, not going to happen. That it got to all the free cash flow of the richest company in the world. That's
Right.
the 200 some billion dollars from last year. And that carries forward this year. They suck up all the free cash flow. And now we get the sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East dumping in their money,
Yeah.
right? So we're going to that level, which good and bad. Like the bad could be when we overbuilt telecommunications and fiber
Yeah.
back in the dot-com
Yeah.
internet period of like 1998, 1996, up until 2000 when the thing crashed, was that you overbuild infrastructure and then you have a 10-year thing where it's like we don't need any more fiber and stuff
Right.
like that, right?
Right. Right.
And that supercharging was when the sovereign wealth money came in,
Hmm.
right? So do we overbuild this time? I think that the AI thing is real. And even though there's sharp drops in prices, that the capabilities are there. So the sharp drops in price I'm talking about is that DeepSeek, a Chinese AI company, came out with an OpenAI o1 equivalent model, and they open sourced it. So open source caught up, and China caught up all
Hmm.
in one blow,
Hmm.
right? So they're like 4 months behind on that, and they're like cheaper. So the a million tokens of data coming in or out is like 50 times cheaper. So instead of paying $100, $100,000, instead of 100,000, you'd pay
Wow.
$4,000.
Wow.
So, and they're making profit at that level.
Yeah.
Only 100 people doing it. So people say, well, you got so cheap, then you don't need to build this super monster data center. No, it actually makes it more valuable
Right.
because now I get better answers cheaper, and I'm going to still scale that out. And even as things get cheaper and cheaper, I still want more better answers. The intelligence I want is still growing.
Have
Um,
you have you used the reasoning apps yet?
yeah, yeah, I've tried to use reasoning apps.
I haven't done that yet. What was the experience like? Was it a significant step up for you?
Yeah, I find I get better answers out of that. It's still not perfect, but again, it's like you have a tireless intern or something like that
Right. Right.
who's educated, a grad, who can get, any kind of research and then, or dedicated Gartner, or McKinsey person who's going to dump you papers and say, give me, information on, XYZ business and write a little report about that and that kind of stuff and give that kind of stuff back. Although I did notice that you know, they seem to have, I gave a couple of those questions that gave me these big, deep research reports. They seem to be um, turning back simpler answers. I think they seem to have dialed down some of the
Oh,
how
interesting.
much of a thing I give you. I have to check my settings on that if I'm not getting that quite right. But they were giving me like, 5, 10 page reports. But they seem to let me do it once a day. Like if I asked multiple times,
Yeah.
they kind of like say, oh, it's queued up, and then it never
Oh,
came back.
I
Right.
see.
So,
Yeah.
I'm paying $20 a month for the Google version. So it's kind of like they're holding back. But now you can download these DeepSeek models. They're open source.
Okay.
They can run on your laptop.
Wow.
The new Digit, which is like a Mac Mini
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
NVIDIA,
Yeah.
that thing could run some of the bigger models. So they also distilled and made the model smaller. So now instead of paying $200 a month for O1,
Yeah.
you could download a model onto
Uh,
your own hardware and do it for free, whatever you pay for electricity,
yeah.
and then you can have these answers being given.
Wow.
Right.
So you mentioned to me that BYD has a $44 billion supply chain debt.
Yeah.
I know that Jeff Lutz, I think it, or is it AJ? One of them has been talking for a while about how they are, paying in like 2 years, paying their
275 days,
275 days or
right.
when I owned my business I would kind of try to stretch people when I had the big business. Sometimes I try to stretch people to 30 or 40 days, but 275, I mean, that's crazy.
Right. Right. So someone did the calculation, some consulting firm made the calculation and said that I think a Hong Kong consulting firm made the calculation and said that if you stack that all up, just like if they
Yeah,
have $60 billion total revenue,
right.
then if you're saying 9 months before I pay you, that's $45 billion,
I
right?
got you. I got you.
Yeah. So
Okay.
basically their entire revenue is like stuck in the supply chain.
Oh my goodness. And
Yeah.
that doesn't count the fact that, of course, they also, like the US companies, they use dealers. So a lot of their cars that they have sold, they've sold to a dealer, which may or may not be selling through. They may or may not be getting paid by their dealers. Uh,
Right.
so I had so many examples in my career of companies that grew their socks off. I mean, you just look, you turn around and there, oh my gosh, you're growing so fast. You got more employees, you got more locations, whatever. And all of a sudden they were bankrupt.
Right.
I mean, it's because you can't outrun your cash.
Right. Right.
And
And this was kind of China has had this for real estate. That was their, they had that big massive real estate
right,
crash,
right.
right? That's where they did a bunch of stuff where they would pre-sell
Yeah,
the condo,
yeah,
right? Oh, so that's, the Go City thing, pre-selling the condo. So then there was speculation on
yeah.
that, even though you'd have to dump in, most all cash versus, loans, that they would do this Ponzi scheme where it's like they sell out an entire, um, skyscraper,
Right,
many
right.
skyscrapers, and then this project pays for the next project kind of thing. And then that finally collapsed. So China seems to be pumping up their entire auto industry this way,
Uh,
right? So yes, China has all this money, but they did just allow one industry to virtually implode,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So, people can say, oh yes, well, China's got the money. Yeah, but if you
yeah.
make this thing big enough, then you have your real estate problem all over again,
All over again.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Huh. All right. Well, you also mentioned on the we have a lot of issues dealing with tariffs. I just put up maybe it was in my last video with Jeff Lutz just a little while ago. I think I might have mentioned on that video that I don't think there will be any tariffs that have been
Mhm.
executed on February 1. And you say,
Um, so the threat was that if Canada and Mexico do not comply,
right,
February 1st, they will institute tariffs
right,
on them. So I would think Canada and Mexico be on the ball because all they got to do is, like deploy some, soldiers, National Guard to the border, shut down, prevent illegals from going over, prevent the drugs from going over. Um, so if you think they'd do it, but I don't think the Canadian government and the Mexican government are that efficient. I know that provincially in Canada, that all the provinces want to do it and just quickly,
right, right,
agree to it because kind of like, it's like $1 trillion worth of trade
right.
between, the U.S. and Canada, and similar numbers between the U.S. and Mexico. So like it's the mass chunk of your economy. So no one in, business wants that to happen. But then if they only get 80% implementation because of incompetence,
Yeah.
then I think Trump would say, okay, you got 80% done, here's 20% tariffs, in order to motivate you to get your act together.
Well,
So I think the incompetence would mean that something would get tariffed.
so China is threatening that they would cut off our milk supply. So I'm thinking,
China
I'm sorry, Canada.
can't. Okay.
Canada says they're going to cut off our milk supply if we do this. And I'm thinking the kids are like, yay, Pepsi.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, Canada, just like the United States is not all one thing. You have Democrats and Republicans here. You have,
Right,
the different parties over in Canada. So there's people, just like if AOC said something about, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, it's
right,
like whatever. So it's, I think there's people who are more leftist who want to stand up to Trump and will say something,
right,
but you know, business still runs the day.
right,
So they would say, okay, because business is the one to be impacted. So they're
right.
going to say, of course, I don't want to,
Yeah, yeah,
lose all this business.
lose
Right.
my income. When is the election?
Canada?
Have they announced the date for the new election for the new,
Canada, no, no.
no,
So the way Canada's stuff works is that the ruling party has any time up to 5 years to call the election. So if you said, okay, it's really good for me to call election in 1 year, I called election in 1 year to get a majority. I had a minority and I call it in 1 year to call the majority. So now the ruling party, the Liberals, are super unpopular, right?
right,
So Trudeau's going to step down,
right.
and then they'll swap something else in. But there's still the Liberals are in
Oh,
charge,
I
so
see.
they're not going to, if they can help it, call election now because they're just going to lose.
I
So
see.
they're going to try and run it out October,
Oh,
November, the last minute they can do it. But the election could be called if things fell apart.
got it.
There's some ways where, just like in England, where you have some non-confidence motion, you don't pass something,
Right.
you totally screw up.
Yeah.
And
Like
then,
having a 25% tariff.
yeah, you can, but you can trigger something. You could
Yeah.
trigger something where, but basically it'd be like NDP, certain elements of your coalition say, we're going to trigger the thing,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So the risk of that happening because of the level of incompetence and stuff that's going on. But if they have any kind of control, they would say, I don't want to do it because we'll just lose,
Right.
right? But then the election, when they call it, will happen in like 6 weeks, something like that. They don't have like this long election cycle. It's like boom, we call it, and then you short campaign and then election. So it's like short, like
Right.
call and then happen.
Right. So, speaking of tariffs, we've got the new ERS, the External Revenue Service, and the ERS is their job is to eliminate the income tax.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
I can imagine. Okay, so what people don't realize is that if we decided to put a 10% tax on every single import, period, across the
Right.
board, Canada, Mexico, which are our two biggest trading partners, China, I think, is number three, Germany, et cetera, but we went across the board 10%, that would not be inflationary. Now, I'm
Hmm.
not even talking about the fact that people would figure out how to keep it from being a full 10% that actually went to the consumer. I'm talking about the fact that it's not inflationary if you have a one-time impact.
Hmm.
So I don't care what the reason is for a one-time impact. It could be the price of raw materials go up, or if it's a one-time impact, that's not inflationary. The only time you're talking inflation is when you've got something that creates a expectation of future
Of
inflation.
constantly increasing prices.
Right, right. So you could put a 10%. Now, what's going to happen? A lot of the other countries are going to say, well, we're going to put a tax on your exports. Okay. So now they have income from our exports. We have income from their exports. And so it's kind of like a value added tax in England or a sales tax that people have talked about in the United States, but
Yeah.
only on imported goods. So
Right.
if that could replace the income tax, I'm for it.
Right. Right. And also, it would have the dynamic of changing the demand for that particular good.
Yes.
So they would. So if I'm going to import less, I'm
Right.
not going to buy as much of product X from company whatever, a country whatever. I would look at the local one. If now that there's the local one costs relatively 10% less, you know if things prices were balanced, but presumably we're buying it from China other places because it's you know, um, lower priced over there. But
Right.
still, once you up it by 10%, 25%, you th consider, okay, I won't buy that product, I'll buy this one, which is locally made, which is what the end objective of what Trump wants. He wants
Sure.
more made in America type things.
Yeah. All right. So you get both. You get put you, and you also have a negotiating tool, which is what Trump has been talking about in terms of
Right.
McKinley. It was a way to raise money for McKinley, but now we have the IRS. But if we can eliminate literally now, people don't. People also have to take into consideration, though, that if we eliminate the IRS, for a lot of people, that's not going to change their tax bill at all. Like for half the
Right.
population, more than half the population, because their entire tax bill is Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah.
So their paycheck's going to look exactly the same if we
Right.
eliminate the IRS.
But in terms of like the whole government efficiency thing,
Right.
that the so much of the governing by tax code thing
Yeah.
of like all these special ins and outs
Right.
kind of
Right.
stuff
Right.
is completely unneeded.
Right.
So I grew up in Canada. Back then, I would always fill out my return. I could do it by hand. It was not that big a deal,
Right.
right? It was still it was 50 pages worth of tax code that I have to read, but then
Yeah.
I could then take a month and do it. I can now do it here, but I have to do it with software. There's no way
Right.
I could do it without software,
Right.
right? Or I would hire someone to do it, right?
Yes.
Because the code is too complicated.
Right.
Um, in when I lived for a while in Hong Kong and Taiwan, the Taiwan one was the size of a postcard.
Mm.
It was, I did it, I think for 2 years. It was like you fill it out, you estimate your thing, and you dump it in, made your declaration, it was done. If you just had a regular salary, it was
Yeah.
like nothing, right? And same thing in Hong Kong. And then Hong Kong had lower taxes. So, you know, people don't realize that there's other ways to do this thing.
Yeah.
One with, valid added or or tariff as
Right.
forms of taxation.
Mhm.
And then there's simplified codes,
Right.
which, you don't need to have. And then I've heard this from, friends who are accountants or tax preparers. Well, then what will we do and stuff like that? You can actually make, the richest lawyers that I knew were lawyers in Hong Kong. Even though there was no tax internally, like any money made in Hong Kong had no tax, that kind of stuff. And but what would the and if you had a company, it was also like a tax-free zone, something like that. So what would the lawyers do? They would make deals. They would say,
Yeah.
okay, you
Yeah.
need to have a deal over in South America and stuff. They were doing business development and
Right.
then taking a cut of that, right? There's always these other things to do, which is productive. It's like I'm gonna start helping you make stuff,
Yes.
right? As opposed to compliance, right?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Listen, the biggest shortage right now in terms of a profession is accountants.
Right.
Nobody wants to do that work.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have to get rid of a few accountants, and I'm not going to lose any sleep about getting rid of lawyers. So it's okay with me.
Yeah. Yeah, but my point is that they don't have to fight it. That
I know.
basically that there's better things to do than
I know.
compliance,
I
right?
know. I know.
Like like this whole and then same thing for if we shift it to a simplified code and do stuff with tariffs, which was actually what was done like 100 years ago. Like 100
Right.
years ago,
Right.
the US was all on tariffs.
Right. Okay. So we have Tesla down the last couple of days.
Mhm.
Little bit, not much. Actually, right now, bumping up against that all-time high, depending on whether you want to call it 410 or
Mhm.
415,
Yeah.
414,
Yeah.
which didn't surprise me at all this morning when it ended up right in that spot.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Technically, because we've already, and we could talk fundamentals too, but technically, what do you think happens for
Technically, it can go down to 390 and we're
90?
still in the bullish channel,
Okay.
right? So like these channels where it's like,
Right.
up and down, up and down. And if you look at that, then the bottom of this upward channel is 390. It
Okay.
can also bounce here at 415,
Right.
but it could also go to 390 and then go back up again. But if it doesn't fall below 390 significantly,
Right.
like end of day, end of week, well below 390, then there's other support below that, 380, 360. So um, we're now creating all these levels
Yeah.
technically
Yeah.
between, 380 and 4
80.
60 or something like that, 440. So 430. So there's all these levels now,
Yeah.
right? So just like before when we're going sideways around um, 160 to
Mhm.
260. There was like a level at every $5. You're like,
Right.
oh, I'm
Right.
breaking out here and breaking out there. And then you always do these tiny moves. So we had these big moves, and then so we could create all the support for a bunch of sideways action,
Hmm.
right? Um, but then there's still the potential of the breakout toward the upside. And also, potential to break out toward the downside. So now we're kind of like clogging things up. So technical is kind of telling us less. So basically, it boils down to we need the real deal fundamental stuff of FSD, FSD approval. Everything else now becomes more noise if we're not breaking through these levels.
All
Um,
right. So I, saw the rumor yesterday about the 600 Optimus,
mhm.
600 a week, by the end of the year.
Yeah.
The supply chains were getting their orders for that level by the end of the year. I just had Jeff Letts on a few hours ago. We'll put the card up in a few minutes. Jeff, I asked Jeff straight up. I said, do you believe the rumors? He's like, yes, I do.
Mhm.
I'm like,
Right.
okay, well, talk to me. He
Yeah.
says, oh, Elon said, that he's he's ready to go. He's going to have these in the factory. I have no reason to believe that it's going to take longer than that to get to production of whatever the first generation bot is. Yes, could there be a second generation between now and then because of things they find out? Sure, but still, it would still be about the end of the year is when that production should take place. And we went through it step by step. People should watch that video, absolutely. So I'm ready to increase my number.
Okay.
I'm
And increasing your number for this year
for this year
for
for the end
bots.
of the year. Yeah, 1,200.
Only
I'm
1,200.
not going to go all the way to 1,500. I think 1,200 is for the end of the year and everything. I think what's going to happen is you're beginning to hear all these different people. Bank of America kind of started it a couple of months ago by talking about the bots. I think Dan Ives said today, he says, I'm not including bots.
Mhm.
You know, it's like, okay, it's time for everybody to get their pencils out if we have supply chain orders in.
Yeah.
So will that happen in 3 weeks? Will that happen in 6 weeks? But at some point, people are going to have to start figuring out what they think that really means, as you and I did when we wrote the book.
Right.
We've had our numbers in for over 2 years, but
Yeah.
Dan Ives and the Bank of America, et cetera, they're going to have to start actually putting and Kathy Wood. We need a number from Kathy.
Mhm. So I'm still at 5,000. I think we're 5,000 bots for this year. That
Five
will be
thousand that they'll make this year. Okay.
right,
Yes.
right. Which basically now, if they can get to 600, it basically means that sometime in Q4, they start ramping in Q3, and then by Q4, 200 a week or something like that. And then if they get to, 500 a week for 10 weeks on average, that would be,
5,000.
they could be 3 weeks into um, Q4 and still hit that 5,000 number.
Okay.
So I think they can do 5,000 this year. And then I'm more confident that they can do, if they do hit that, then the 50,000, 100,000 that he was talking about before is also there. Because again, it's once it's doing useful stuff and the things are making them, ramping is trivial. It's just, they just have to say, okay, yeah, we want to have more. So then the cost of doing it is not the factor.
Right. Okay. So I'm at 1,200, you're at 1,500, right?
5,000,
I'm sorry,
5,000.
5,000 for the year.
Yeah.
The stock price for the end of the year,
Oh, yeah, yeah. So stock price. Oh, we were talking about stock price. Oh, yes, 1,500 stock price. I thought you were talking about number of bonds. Okay.
1,500 by the end of the year. Okay.
Okay.
So that
Yeah.
and my 1,200, could change if the bot is put off or if the robotaxis are put off. But I don't think it'll change that much because I think at this point it isn't really I think even the naysayers, some of the naysayers are still saying that the I mean the robotaxi is like years away. I think most sensible people know, is it July? Is it December? Is it
Mhm.
next March? I mean, it's close.
Right.
So if it gets put off for 3 months, it doesn't really change the
Right.
calculation of the stock price that much.
Right. Right.
Okay.
I would like to see, you know, the, in Q1 here, so another 2 months or so, the big FSD in China, thing, and,
Uh,
and then
yeah,
some other stuff. I'd like to see those things to happen.
right.
Um, you know, I would start getting nervous around April. Although it can all happen all at once, but
Sure.
it would be more comforting to
Right.
know
Right.
that, okay, we're on track and it happens by April or May or something like that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
still got 3, 4 months for that.
Yep. I wonder, do you think that they'll say I think they will. Do you think they'll say anything at the earnings call about the vehicles that are currently being, any kind of stats or any kind of feedback about the vehicles that are being driven, quote unquote, unsupervised right now?
Mm,
They
I
just,
think it'll be in generalities. I don't think it'll
I,
be very specific. It'll be like, oh yeah, it's going great. Yeah, we have it. So I don't think they've been very like, here's numbers around
yeah.
that. They haven't done that before. I would like them to start doing that,
Yes, I
but
do too. Yeah.
they haven't started, and I don't think they will. I think it would be like the quarter or two after they roll out Robotaxi, or
Mhm.
after the China FSD. So if
Mhm.
China FSD is authorized, they sell 500,000 FSD in China, right? Okay, now it's material, it's over $1 billion. They gotta, give us the numbers,
Right.
right? So those kind of like, because it's become so big and real, that they have to give us numbers. I would expect them to give better numbers on the um, Shanghai Megapack factory, right?
Okay.
To say, okay, we did something there
Yeah.
specifically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope someone asked them about that,
Right.
right? That they would
Right.
say, you know, everyone who's got shares and can get to the Say app or something. I'm not sure if they start open that question up, you know, and get them to answer, how many megapacks are being made out of Shanghai, right?
Yeah,
And when they're going to be shipped and blah blah blah. So that would be real numbers. It's material they would know they should answer that kind of question for the for the cars and various other things. It's kind of like for FSD trials and that kind of stuff. Um, I don't think it's at the point where they're forced to answer, and so they won't.
yeah. So, so the China numbers are up for the first 3 weeks, 3.8%. The Model Y Juniper will be coming out for sure in China within the next 5 weeks, 6 weeks, if March 1 or maybe sooner, because maybe the March 1 was just kind of a not after March 1 or something. Maybe it'll be coming out in the United States. Jeff Lutz predicted on air just a little while ago that they'll announce the United States website tomorrow. So that's an interesting one. Tomorrow. So we'll see. I wonder why tomorrow. Anyway, I didn't ask him why he thought it was tomorrow. So do you think Model Y will you think the Juniper will increase the sales in China?
Over the course of 2025, yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they'll sell more because of the upgrades.
Yes, they
Okay.
will.
All right. Okay. Because the Model 3, which has gotten rave reviews, crazy rave reviews, just got another review today where they're the number one car, period. It's the best car, period.
Right.
That
Right.
you could buy, especially at the price. It says, especially at the price, but it's the best car you could buy, no matter what. It didn't really see the pop, didn't see the pop in sales. So, but you think why will have a pop in sales because of it?
Yes, I think they will have a pop in sales. Yeah.
All right. Anything else that you're passionate about today, Brian Wang? Are we?
Let me think. I think
Oh,
yeah, I can't think of it.
so you gave me one thing that you liked about the Trump administration in the first few days, but overall, how do you feel about about this first few days of
Well, yeah,
activity?
getting Doge in there, so hiring 20 people, the team, having them inside the agencies, that's positive. The um, What are the things that they've done, doing stuff to get the federal employees to work in the office and stuff like that. There's all those things that are reshaping, and I think going to reduce the costs and increase the efficiency of the government. That's all happening. Um, so I think that is going well.
What about the speed of their rollout? Is this
Yeah, the speed looks good. Like a lot of announcements. Things that seem to be efficiently happening. Um, yeah, so I think it's all looking pretty good. What do you think? Anything you noticed in particular that?
I just I am just I'm blown away by the speed. I mean, it's like
Mm,
uh, literally, I think you may be able to make a case a month from now that the Trump administration will have done more in their first month than any president in history has done in 2 terms, maybe three
right,
terms, 3.5 terms if you count FDR. But I mean,
right,
because and it's not that they're doing things that are not impactful. I mean,
mm,
the things that they're doing are impactful.
mm,
They're eliminating departments.
right,
Websites are gone too, at least that I
yeah,
know.
right,
They're changing the entire way that they hire, fire, and promote.
right,
They're requiring companies and universities, et cetera, to change the way that they
right.
operate or lose funding. I mean, these are significant changes,
Hmm.
and lots of them in
Right.
just a few days. I just can't even imagine if it keeps at this pace. Have to hold our hearts as we get up in the morning. What have they done today?
Right. And then the standard by which they can end up being judged would be like, if they start they talk about expansion again. So I forgot the other one is that announcing that they're going to go a manned mission to Mars,
Oh, yes,
right?
right.
So that would be huge. And they talked about he talked about expanding the United States. You know,
Right.
so people read that as Greenland, Panama Canal, and maybe some of Canada, right?
Yeah.
I think that that may not be the case. That basically
Oh,
you could get a deal, like I've said, having a business deal where they develop Greenland resources,
right.
have more base, but that doesn't necessarily mean changing, you know, Greenland into, one they could break free of Denmark, but they doesn't necessarily become a state, become a protectorate, something like that. But they would have um, a tight relationship,
Right.
a special relationship between the
Right.
United States
Right.
and Greenland, right? But the expansion, I was thinking about it, would be expanding the US to Mars,
Oh, I
right?
see. Yes. Okay. There you go.
Mars and the moon, right? Because if we're making 1,000 starships and sending fleets out there and putting 1 million people on there, right?
Right.
That's more than the population of Alaska and several other states, right?
Right.
That
Right.
if you have 1 million people, right? So yes, it'd be a start, but if I was to look, roll back the clock as to what's the lowest population of 13 colonies,
Yeah.
right? I think the overall, when they in 1776, they had 2 million,
Yeah.
right? So then you'd have some that had 100,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So you could get, a 10,000, 100,000 people onto Mars and then declare it a US state,
There you go. There
right?
you go. Yeah.
So expanding across the solar system would be bigger than that. So the I think that would be, and there's some stuff about, okay, well, there's treaties. You can't um um
Oh,
where we say, well, you're not going to own territory outside
right.
of orbit, you're not going to have territory in the Earth and Moon. That was before we could actually do it.
Right.
And Trump has already pulled out of other treaties, pulled out of the Paris Accords,
Right. Right.
on that, right? So those treaties are nothing. To say I'm going to honor some treaty about not owning territory out in space, screw that noise. We're gonna, land on Mars, stick our flag there, and it's gonna become 51st state, right? So 51st to 100th state.
Right.
So
Right.
Moon and Mars colonization, I think, is in the way, and that would be the expansion. And in terms of like, greatest president ever kind of thing,
That'd be pretty
if
cool.
I, just like, the kings and queens, who sent over colonies
Right.
over from Europe is like,
Yeah.
but they didn't follow through, and they like think like, they weren't able to retain their colonies,
Right.
right?
Right.
But if we do this way, I think we could, and that would be, you know, historic in the history books
Historic.
kind of thing.
Yes. It's very historic. Well, we'll give, at least they should name the darn, Mars state. The first Mars state should at least be named after Elon. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
or he'll call it Doge.
yeah,
The state of Doge.
yeah, right.
All right, Brian, as always, so great to have you on. And
Yep.
I know that you've got another subject matter that we're going to be dealing with for a video coming up. Do you want to tease it at all?
It's XI and Grok 3. Yeah, so
X. Okay.
Grok 3 has been revealed, so we're going to talk about that.
Grok 3 has been revealed. We will talk about that for sure. Okay,
Okay.
thanks, Brian. And by the way, the card will be right here for the Jeff Lutz. Please go check it out. And to all of you, it has been great talking to you.